Howdy, and welcome to the Lost Rider podcast. It's an honor and privilege to address you in the capacity of an interviewer, reporter, and media member. Too many modern media outlets have forgone the integrity and responsibility required of credible information sources. What you will receive here are straightforward discussions with legislators, agency leaders, biologists, engineers, doctors, and countless other experts that have the answers to questions often circulated as kitchen table issues. The title Lost Rider may be thought of literally as well as in the metaphorical sense. While there has been the instance that I was momentarily a little turned around at night in a wilderness area, the idea of being a lost rider in life, well, that fits most folks at some time. These renderings are coming to you in the form of the 25-year-old radio program, The News from the Camp House. It still airs every Saturday morning at 6:30 a.m. Central Time on KULM 98.3 FM out of Columbus, Texas. The original intent was to relate outdoor topics to the general public. Immediately, it was found that all issues are relatable to the outdoors and that people are people. They all play a role and they all have a vested interest. It's this program's desire to answer common questions about how the world works, how it will operate in the future, and what's the holdup? So please listen, enjoy, and never hesitate to contact us with more questions and feedback. Good morning and welcome to this weekend's edition of News from the Camp House. It's also brought to us by the Shaw's Bend Social Club. Country club folks who don't have a country club. All right, tell you what, we're here this weekend. We're actually at the moment, we're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. But I am with documentarian and videographer Paul Fuzinski. And that's who we're going to speak with this morning. We're going to find out a little bit more about some of the business that he does and the pitfalls and, the contortions he has to do business-wise as far as taking care of his business. What's it actually take to put together a documentary? Paul, how you doing this morning?
Herman, I'm doing fantastic.
All right. Now, most recently, Paul's been in Texas. He's from Ohio. But most recently, he's been in Texas. He's been working with the executive editor of Texas Fish and Game magazine, and they put together a documentary on great white sharks on the Texas Gulf. And, we visited with Chester previously about it a little bit, but I want to know what it took to actually put that documentary together. What did it take? What were the mechanics, to get the information and put it all in a format that was entertaining and informative, for the public. So, Paul, tell us a little bit about, how do you do this? How did you approach that particular project?
Well, the Great White Shark documentary was actually a lot of fun. I mostly have done in the past, big megafauna wildlife, North America. You got your elk and got your mule deer and all that fun stuff out west. And Great White Sharks was not on the agenda, but when you're dealing with Chester Moore, you never really know what you're going to get yourself into. And he said, hey, would you be able to go out to Cape Cod with me and film a Great White Shark documentary? And when someone asks you that question, you're insane if you say no, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go do something like that. So, it was a lot of work to make a documentary like that. It ended up being close to 40 minutes long, and we interviewed some of the world's leading experts on great white sharks out there at Cape Cod. We went out on a boat. We were filming great white sharks. They didn't have cages, so we weren't able to get under the water, and we weren't allowed to bait them because it's not legal up there. But it was a lot of fun. We got to interview Dr. Greg Skomall, got to interview Dr. Megan Winton, who are two leading experts. And the coolest part for me was just seeing a great white shark in person. Not a lot of people can say that they've done that. And standing on a, huge ocean-going boat and looking over the side railing through a camera, seeing a 14-foot great white shark is pretty awesome. And, I would encourage everybody to go check it out on Chester's YouTube channel, Chester Moore, wildlife journalist. And, it was a lot of fun.
All right, okay, you said you're not allowed to bait them, but how do you get where you see them? I mean, you go out in the ocean and you think you're going to go look for something. How do you get where you can see them?
It was actually pretty interesting. They had a pretty elaborate setup to spot the sharks. So what they do is they go out on the boat. They have scheduled pilots that fly over the shoreline. They go back and forth and they just look for great white sharks, and they can see them. And then they tell the boats where they're at. They kind of have a radio communication up to the airplanes, those little tiny airplanes you see, and they're flying above the ocean, and they just tell them where they're at. The boat gets there, and then once the boat locates the shark, you get close enough to it, and there's the scientists on board of the boat take up a drone, and they get video footage of the shark to see how it behaves around boats. Or it depends on what study they were doing. When we were there, they had a study they were doing. They would drive the boat up to the shark at full speed to see how the shark would react, and they were monitoring that on the drone to see how the sharks react to that, because they're kind of worried about sharks getting hit by boats. It's a really interesting and elaborate process. And, anybody that knows anything about airplanes knows they're expensive. So all that stuff costs a ton of money to run and do all that research. And, me being who I am, I had to ask, Dr. Greg Skomall. I said, how do they fund all this? And I don't remember the exact name. It was like the something Bro Act, which is a subset of the Dingell-Johnson Act. Okay. And so, back to the North American model, something you talk about a lot, something I'm really interested in. Even the great white shark research is funded by hunter and fishermen. So you got to take that into account. I thought that was pretty epic, actually.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's cool. All right. So what did they figure out? What type of results? What have they learned from these studies?
So I asked them about that while I was there. I was like, are you finding out that they're scared of the boats? And they basically said the sharks are having no reaction to the boats coming up on them, which is not a good thing. If they get hit by a boat propeller or something, that's going to screw them up. So I don't know what became of that study. It's probably still ongoing. I think they said they were going to do that for a couple of years. Not quite sure where that ended up, but they also have a pretty unique system out there. I think it's called Shark Watch or Shark Alert or something. And it's actually, we saw it in action. You're on the boat, and we were on top of a great white shark that I was filming. And when they spot a shark in the water, they have a cell phone app or whatever. They press a button, and it says there's a shark here. And you watched on the beach, they have flags up and down the beach, and someone raised the flag saying that there was a shark right there, because there are surfers and people out swimming in the surf and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting to watch the technology they have to alert people of sharks to keep them safe. I wish I could remember the name. Oh, it's called Sharktivity. That was the name of the app, Sharktivity. And anybody can do it. If you're out on a boat, you can say, "Hey, there's a shark out here, great white," and they'll put up a flag on the beach to alert the public. So I thought that was pretty neat.
All right. Okay. Well, I would assume, I think about it for a while, and it's like anything else, that at times, they're great danger, and at times they may be no danger. And did you see any of that? Is that a result of any studies? Did they come up with any information about that type of stuff?
Well, you're dealing with an ocean predator, so there's always that risk that there's going to be something to happen, but it's no different than, you and I were just out in grizzly country for 5 days. They're wild animals, they don't have to, it's not like you or me. They don't have to have a reason. Sometimes they just get cranky, or you're in their spot and you don't want them to be. I don't know the exact science on that shark stuff, that's not something we really dove into, but it's just something that's like, there's people out that go out there every day on the Cape Cod, and they're just on kayaks and paddle boards, and there's sharks swimming under them. There's hours and hours of footage on Instagram reels and stuff of people flying drones, and there's great white sharks right below people. They have no idea they're there. And I'd say probably just like grizzlies, 90% of the time, they don't do anything. They just kind of go away. They don't want to be around you. We probably rode past some out on the horses, and we didn't even notice.
Right.
And they don't want anything to do with you. But then there's that, small percentage of the time where you're wrong place, wrong time. They're hungry, or you're near a baby, or who knows what's going on. So it's just like any other wildlife. You want to be careful. And all I know is I wasn't going in that water with them. I'm not putting myself at risk for no reason. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. All right. So, Cape Cod. All right. How many, you said you saw one. How many do you reckon y'all filmed while y'all were out there?
So we only filmed one shark. But while we were out there, they spotted 5, 6. And we didn't drive. We weren't going that far up and down the coast. I mean, there's 5 or 6 of them that were spotted in that day, and I'm sure there's dozens of them out there at any given time. And they're pretty close to the beach. I mean, we were within a few hundred feet of the beach. So, I mean, they're prowling in shallow water looking for seals. And that was kind of a cool conservation success story, I guess, on a side note. The seals, I guess, fishermen back in the day were wiping them out because they thought they were depleting their fish catches. Mm-hmm. And the populations collapsed, and that's kind of when I think they were getting a little more concerned about the sharks, because now they didn't have a food source. They eat fish and stuff too, but these seals populations were wiped out, and now they're starting to make a comeback. So hence, there's more sharks showing up. So I thought that was pretty interesting because I didn't know that about the seals. And we saw a ton of seals while we were out there. Them some stinky sons of guns out there. You could smell them 100 yards off the beach. They're just piled up on the shoreline. You're like, good Lord, these guys, they smell bad.
Really? No, I didn't have any. Yeah, people don't even think of that. Yeah. But all right, I'll tell you what. Let's take a quick break and thank the folks who let us come on here every Saturday morning. We'll be right back. Thank goodness for all the great sponsors we have here at News from the Camp House. HEB Food Stores. That's Stephen Tice at HEB. He helps me. He helps the community. He's a great man. I'm so thankful HEB loosened him up, lets him go around and sponsor a few things. HEB's got all your food needs. It's the greatest food store we got here in Columbus. Thank goodness for HEB. First State Bank. You go over to the First State Bank, they'll take care of all your loans, all your deposits, your savings, anything you need. Bunch of great hometown people over there. You got Celia Tobias, John Pollock. Everybody over there is looking out for you. Miss Barbara Barta. It's a great bunch of folks at the First State Bank is also sponsoring News from the Camp House. First State Bank takes care of all my business. Baumgart Agency, Susan Baumgart at the Baumgart Agencies, her and Germania. She told me to plug Germania. Germania is a insurance that she likes everybody to know about. The Baumgart Agencies. Miss Susan and I are classmates, been classmates. She got me out of high school, sat right beside her, put us in alphabetical order where I could copy. And Susan Baumgart over at the Baumgart Agency, taking care of all your insurance needs. Lyco Realty, one of the original sponsors of News from the Camp House. Lyco Realty, the oldest real estate company in the county, and for the last 3 years voted the favorite realtor in the county. Lyco Realty, that's Miss Kimberly Johnson, that's Crockett's granddaughter. More kinfolks and classmates and great people from Colorado County. People from Colorado County helping people from Colorado County, that's great. Oh, thank goodness for all these wonderful people come to me want to be sponsors for News from the Camp House. All right. Welcome back. Second half of this week's News from the Camp House. Sitting here with Paul Fuzinski, documentarian. Paul recently worked on a documentary with Chester Moore, executive editor of Texas Fish and Game magazine. Okay, so we said earlier that it's about great whites on the Texas Gulf coastline, but we've been talking about Cape Cod. So that's Massachusetts, correct?
Yes, sir. Yep, just outside of Boston.
Okay, so where does Chester, how does he contort this into being great whites on the Texas Gulf Coast?
Well, that's where a lot of the research is being done, is up there at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of like the leading experts on the Atlantic shark stuff. And we went up there because Dr. Megan Winton is kind of one of the leading researchers who kind of figured out that these sharks were going into the Gulf. You know, they were finding this stuff out, and they put a shark tracker on this shark named Leebeth, and they tracked her up and down the Gulf of Texas and all the way down to Mexico. She went, and then she swam all the way back up to Mexico and went all the way back up the East Coast into Nova Scotia. So, I mean, this shark did some serious traveling, and Megan is based out of the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. So we went up there to interview her and learn more about what they do up there and how they're tracking the sharks. And it's pretty revolutionary stuff. I mean, there was reports back in the day, early 1900s, of people spotting great whites in the Gulf, but then people just write it off as stories and stuff like that. We actually have bona fide research that there's tons of sharks in the Gulf. So that's how we ended up there, and we might be going back here in a few months. We'll see how that winds up.
All right, what was their explanation? What's this great amount of travel? Are they coming off the East Coast, come into the Gulf, cruise up and down the Texas coast, go down to Mexico, and turn around and go all the way up to Nova Scotia? What, why? Why would they travel like that?
That I don't have a good answer for. I mean, I think, from, if I remember correctly, that had something to do with just food, and just like any other animal, they have travel corridors and they're running up and down. It might have something to do with the weather. When it warms or cools up north, they go down south to stay warmer. And then, I don't have a good scientific explanation for you on that one.
All right, what did they find as far as, great whites? This is being talked about like it's a new idea that great whites are in the Texas waters, but apparently, they've been here before.
Yeah, there are some of the reports that we had in the documentary going back to like early 1900s, 1930s, 1940s, 50s, through the 80s and 90s. And, people have seen them off the Gulf Coast while they're fishing. Some guys said they had them swim right by their legs while they were out wade fishing. Some guys seen them offshore. And, fishermen, just like hunters, they know what they're seeing out there. They spend their whole life out there fishing, and they see hundreds of species of fish every day. And, when something's off. And, it'd be like if you were hunting up here and where we're at in Jackson Hole, and, you see all these elk and stuff, and then you saw some weird animal that wasn't supposed to be here, and people would just be like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't seem right. So there's all these, what they call anecdotal reports, that kind of verified what Chester had been thinking this whole time, because he had a buddy call him once off the Gulf Coast on a satellite phone, which we did interview him. His name was Captain Ryan Warhola. He called Chester while he was out running a charter boat, and he's like, I'm pretty sure I just saw a great white shark. This was in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so Chester started digging into the research on this. That's how he found all these old reports. And then, people just, at the end of the movie, people were saying, Ryan was saying, people thought I was crazy. And now he's like, I have verified scientific evidence that I'm not crazy, because he's like, at first he thought it was a mako shark. He's like, I don't know, this thing's pretty big, dude. Like, I don't think it's a mako shark. It's not a common species that I'm seeing all the time. And that's really what started this whole story. And that's kind of how it snowballed, is Ryan saw the shark, called Chester. Chester kind of verified that he thought it was a great white. That's when he started digging in, finding these old stories. And that's when Megan had posted something online where she saw that this great white shark was in the Gulf, verified. That's when he was like, we got to tell this story, because nobody's telling it. And as far as I know, we're the first people to ever tell this story. I mean, I'm sure somebody will again at some point, but that's the whole premise of the documentary. And, it took a ton of work, but I think it's a good product. I think we did the best we could with what we had.
All right. How hard was it to do it? I mean, as far as your camera work and your audio and getting all the footage and putting it all together, how hard was that?
I mean, it was fairly difficult because it was just me and Chester. I mean, we didn't have a team. You know, a lot of people film documentaries. They go out there, they have a team of people, guys doing lighting, guys doing. I mean, it was just him and I. I rolled up with a suitcase full of camera equipment, a couple of lights, and you know, it was nerve wracking. You're interviewing one of the most. You know, these people are on Shark Week and they're on big time TV shows every day, and it's just me and Chester out there interviewing them in their offices, and it was a ton of work. You definitely have to be attentive, you know what I mean? You have to make sure everything's running. You don't have two guys watching your equipment. It's just you. And but you know, I've done it so many times where it's just me and him, or me by myself making these documentaries. That I'm kind of used to that. But yeah, we're always looking for, you know, funding for these documentaries. That's the hardest part of making this stuff. But you know, you also got to go out and do it to get funding. So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
What about, the salt water, just on your equipment?
Mm-hmm. I didn't really have too many problems with that. I mean, you always try and keep your cameras out of the water. You get a lot of spray and stuff on your lenses. That salt water is pretty bad on stuff. You know, tripods, you can't have, you know, metal stuff out there. It's going to rust. It just eats it up. Even we were only there for 4 days. But yeah, you got to be really careful. You got to have sealed underwater housings if you're shoving cameras in the water. But yeah, overall it wasn't too bad. I didn't come out with any massive any massive problems with any of my equipment, but saltwater is tough.
When you put the thing together, were there a certain amount of graphics, maps, diagrams, coastal maps showing where these sharks are showing up, that type of thing that you had to go get?
Yeah, they had some of those maps. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy had some of those maps, and there's another group that's doing similar research called O-Search. And they had maps tracking where the sharks were going, and then, you know, I just had to make some maps to show some of the animations of where that shark was swimming, and, you know, making up some animations, just figuring it out. Like I said, there's no budget, so we just make it work. But yeah, there is information out there. If you watch the documentary, there is information out there where people can actually look this stuff up in real time and see where those sharks are at, which I think is amazing, you know, that they're able to do that.
All right, where would they look?
So if you want to watch it, you can go to Chester's YouTube channel, Chester Moore Wildlife Journalist. You can go to his website, highercallingwildlife.net. You can go to my website, aptitudeoutdoors.com. It's available on all of those places, and you know, I like to think we did a pretty good job for what we had to work with.
All right, no, that's all good. I'm trying to think. All right, I don't know what great whites' main diet is, but wouldn't they be following like shrimp boats and stuff?
I don't know. I mean, their main diet off the Cape is supposed to be seals, but I believe they do eat other things. I think, if I remember correctly, they'll eat fish. They'll eat, you know, if a whale dies, a carcass starts floating up, they'll eat that. They don't have any qualms about eating rotten stuff. I think they'll eat sea turtles. Yeah, I don't know if they're following shrimp boats around and stuff like that. I think the ocean's got a lot of food in it, so I don't think they're lacking, and they're huge animals, so.
Well, I was just trying to think what's most plentiful, what you see on the Texas coast, and it just, I would assume that, you know, I think, you know, your shrimpers and those guys, if they're actually coming up, or into the shallows, which is what we're talking about, that's the point, is that we're letting people know that these things are coming up in the shallows. They're not just offshore.
Yeah, well, they're in the shallows, but we were talking to Dr. Greg Scomal, and they actually have trackers on them, and some of them have dove down deep into the ocean, like way deep out into the ocean. And one of the weird things about great white sharks, you know, we have all this technology nowadays. We think we know everything. They still don't know where they breed. They still don't know where these sharks are breeding. After all this research, after all this time. So they're thinking that that's what they do down in those depths, but they don't know. So that's what they're trying to figure out. So they're not always just right offshore, but they're big fish. They can be anywhere in the water column if they want to be. But I mean, that's where we see them the most. They could be right off the shore, especially in some of that Gulf and some of that murky water. You'd have no idea, and chances are they're not going to bother you. But how many shark attacks of great whites have you heard of in the Gulf? I've never heard of any.
Right.
But they're there. They are there. I can guarantee you that.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, now we know they're there. Okay. Paul, thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And, I've had Herman and I have been out in the woods for a couple of days out here in Montana filming a documentary for him. So you're going to have to keep your eyes out for that. That'll be coming out here in the next couple of months.
All right. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it this morning. Paul and I are out here doodling around, getting some video in Wyoming and Montana. So, y'all, this weekend's edition was also brought to us by the Shaws Bend Social Club, country club, folks who don't have a country club. Now, y'all go out and enjoy the rest of your weekend, go wading in the Gulf thinking about those great whites, and be safe, have fun, and y'all just remember, pretty much in a day, it's sure a good day to be out in the woods.